Hello, my name is Matthew, and we're going to be going over how to set up a virtual machine for Windows Server 2019. Before we start, there are some base requirements to be able to follow along with this tutorial. First, it's required to have a stable internet connection. Second, it's required that you have a capable computer to run a virtual machine, minimum requirements being a 4-core CPU and a minimum of 8 gigabytes of RAM. And thirdly, a general understanding of how to navigate a Windows environment and use programs. With everything all set up, on screen are some timestamps so you can skip ahead as you need. To start, I would like to go over some of the programs we'll be using throughout this video. As expected, you will need a web browser to download the necessary software and files for this tutorial. Personally, I use Firefox, however, any modern web browser should suffice. Next, the main program we'll be using is the Virtual Machine Manager software. In our case here, I prefer Oracle Box VM Manager, or VirtualBox as it's known as. And the reason I personally use this program is due to VirtualBox being an open source project. This does come with some downsides, however, VirtualBox fills my needs and it's free for all platforms. With that, let's get started with this tutorial. In order to begin, we first need to download the required files and programs. All links in this video are in the description. So, open your web browser and go to the Windows Server 2019 installation page. As you can see here, this installation page will have several versions to get from. You can have the Essentials Hyper-V server. We are going to want Windows Server 2019. We're going to click ISO, and it's going to pull up this prompt. I personally just give it junk here. As you can see, I've given it junk before, mostly because this just gives them information. Hold on, there we go. Just gives them some information to work with, and we really don't need to put in our personal stuff. Even the country doesn't necessarily matter here, just because it's only asking for like survey reasons. With that, this is where the ISO begins. You will select your preferred language. I choose English. And when you click download, it'll start this download file here. With that, you can rename it to anything you want, leaving the ISO. Personally, I do server 19, or just hit a bunch of random numbers, of course. And as you can see, I've already installed it, so I'm not going to install it here again. But if you don't have it set up where it asks you for a download, it'll just be in your downloads folder. Assuming that you're in the process of downloading the ISO, you'll need to check to see if your VirtualBox is currently up to date. I have VirtualBox already installed, so I will not need to install it again. However, if you are setting this up for your first time, your download page will look like this here, and you will want to select the Windows hosts. That'll bring up your executable, and you'll go through the installation page that it gives you. This is probably the longest part here, so what we're going to have you do is pause the video here, and when you're done installing VirtualBox, when you're done getting the ISO, come back, continue the video, and we can get started with this tutorial. Welcome back. Now that you have your Windows Server 2019 ISO downloaded and your VirtualBox Manager installed, what we are going to do is we are going to open up VirtualBox and have it ready to go. As you can see, you are greeted by a very nice GUI having different settings you can tweak, and if you had any previous virtual machines, they will end up on this pane. For now, we don't need to mess with any of those settings because we are just going to create a new virtual machine. To create a new virtual machine, we will click on New and we'll pull up this menu. For us, I like to name it something that can be easily remembered. Server 2019 is a go-to since we are installing a Server 2019 ISO. I personally have different locations where I keep my items, so I'm going to go into here and just set it up so that I can put all of my files where they need to go. And for the type, we need Microsoft Windows, and the version, we need Server 2019 or Windows 2019. This is going to be important since we need to have it set up properly for the ISO we are using. We're going to go ahead and click Next. Now this is where we give it our memory. With a minimum of 8 to have things set up, it's recommended that Windows Server has a minimum of 4. So we're going to give around 4 gigabytes of RAM. This will be 4,000 megabytes roughly. It's not an actual one-to-one translation. However, this will be close enough for our purposes. We're going to click Next and we'll end up at the virtual hard disks. We would like to create a virtual hard disk now because we will need to have it set up so we can install Server 2019. However, you can use existing virtual hard disks here and this will just create a virtual machine. When you click create, you'll end up at this hard disk type. You can select VHD or VMDK. These two options will be good if you're going to a different virtual machine management software, such as Hyper-V. This will just be an easy transfer and can be used as go-to, just default. We're going to select VDI because we are using a VirtualBox software, and this will just make it more efficient for VirtualBox to use. Click Next, and we will be using dynamically allocated for our file type. The reason why is if we do a fixed size and allocate it now, it will take a little longer for setup, and the performance having a fixed size will give isn't necessarily that important on a machine that has an SSD like I'm using. If you have a hard drive and you really need this virtual machine to just be as snappy as possible, you can use fixed size to make it as fast as it can be. You click Next, and you're going to now give it the amount you want. For Windows Server 2019, it is a recommended minimum of 50 gigabytes. However, I personally like to give it a maximum of 70 gigabytes. The reason why is for Server 2019, there's a lot that you end up doing, and having too many installs can easily just collect and just fill up the system, and it's good to have a little bit of wiggle room. We're going to go ahead and click Create, and as you will see, the virtual machine that we just created ends up in this little area. For context, here's my other ones. We aren't done yet. Even though we have a virtual machine, we can't just power it on. The first thing we need to do is change the settings. So we open up settings by clicking on that little settings. If you click on settings and nothing happens, make sure that your virtual machine is selected and it's blue, and then it'll open up this menu. Here is some basic settings to get it so that you can have a easy use like clipboard dragging, stuff like that, but we're going to start with system. This is where you can change your RAM and all of those important informations. We keep it at 4,000 megabytes, just to make it simple, but I am going to add a minimum of 2 cores. This is why you need a 4-core CPU. Having physical cores on a virtual machine makes it so that it's not bogged down by any tasks on your main system. Dedicating virtual cores to a virtual machine will still work, but what will end up happening is that the entire system will seem slower because it's interweaving different processes. So we add 2 cores with a minimum of 4-core CPU, and for acceleration, this should just be left as default. Display. Personally, I like to turn up my display to maximum if it hasn't done so already. The newer versions of VirtualBox will just automatically go up, some of the older ones don't. And for the storage, we are going to insert our ISO file. You will need the path or the location of where you stored it, but you will select this drop down here and choose a disk file. This will pull up to my personal storages, and I will click on Server 2019. Your ISO should populate in here with the name of it, and you should be able to see that this is the ISO you're looking to install with. If you do not see it, you might need to check to see if you set up your virtual machine correctly, or you might need to see if this is an actual ISO and you got the right file. From there, we can go check our network to see if we are attached to NAT. This is making your computer almost like a switch where you'll get the internet to your computer and your computer will spread that out to your virtual machines. Very oversimplification, but it'll be fine. Next, we'll go to USB, and if you can, I personally like using USB 3.0 so that we can get the full pass-through connection for it. Now we have set all of our settings for our first time use. So we're going to hit OK here, and we're going to get ready to start the virtual machine. Now with everything set up, we are ready to go and start the VM for the first time. So what we're going to do is we are going to click Start. And you will see that it will pop up at the virtual machine and a prompt to select the drive. We will need to select the ISO that we have installed. Previous versions would just use the ISO that was already in the virtual drive. However, the newer editions let you choose as you're starting the ISOs and all of the virtual machines so that you can select the ones that you need. You will see attached that you will have a bunch of choices if you've done this a lot, but for our purposes, we will find our ISO file I have named Server 2019, and we will click Choose. When this is populated, it should pop up in this little drop-down menu, and we are going to click Start. You will see that it will start the installation for Windows Server 2019, and we are just going to go through the first time setup on camera just to show what it's like for the virtual machines. So as it takes a second here, you'll notice that every virtual machine is going to be a little bit different. Some are going to be slower, but usually if you have a fast hard drive or an SSD, the installations are going to be very, very much faster than if you just were to do it from a USB disk on a actual physical machine or in general just a slow hard drive. So with this, we're going to continue when this picks up the installation page. Welcome back. So, as you can see, we are in the Server 2019 installation page. We're just going to leave everything default, click Next, and we're going to click Install Now. If you've ever installed Windows 10 or any other versions of Windows Server, this is going to be roughly the same process as these other versions. Mostly, this is what we're going to use every single time for an installation of Windows Server, and so we can just kind of click on through if you already know what you're doing. So for this tutorial, we are just going to select the Data Center Evaluation. Desktop Experience. Sorry, we are going to select the Data Center Evaluation Desktop Experience. The reason why is we want the desktop experience for our first time use of Windows Server. However, the data center evaluation without the desktop can be much more efficient if you're actually running a server. We click Next. We're going to click Accept. I've tried clicking Not Accept once and it just didn't let me do anything. And we are going to want to do a custom install. Windows 10, Windows in general, if you do an upgrade, it just assumes that you're installing a version that is newer than the previous version of Windows you already have installed. We don't have a different version, so we need to custom select the unallocated space, which should be our virtual machine hard drive, and click Next. So this will take some time, but when it automatically restarts, it should automatically start into the Windows Server full edition rather than the ISO installation. So I'm going to come back when this is done, and for now we're just going to let this go. Welcome back. As you can see, it took quite a bit of a time. However, it should have automatically restarted itself a couple times and you should have ended up on this screen. Now, for Windows Server, getting a administrative password set up is the first thing that it allows you to do. After everything starts for the first time, you should be on this screen and this screen alone. Reason why is because for Windows Server, having the administrative account be the end-all be-all account for the user to interact with server is the key. Since you are the administrator, this will be fine for you, but in company environments, sometimes a virtual machine password needs to be set up in a special process. For us, I have a password algorithm that I already use, and I'm going to be using that for my personal password. However, as you, the end user, probably setting this up for your first time, it is recommended that you pick a very strong and very memorable password. This will be something that will be needed quite a bit if you don't set up any other accounts, and it's going to be important in the end run for your Windows Server. I will be entering my password here, and we will click Finish. This is the first screen you will see after entering your password. There aren't any final setups like in Windows 10, and there really isn't any like, do you want these features done? Those are always done post installation, and we will get to that. For us, we're going to hit Control Delete, well, right Control and Delete, which is the VirtualBox Control Alt Delete hotkey. If you're having troubles finding any of the hotkeys, it should be in Input, Keyboard, and you will see any of these print screen, Control Delete, any of these functions already pre-built in. Input and Control Delete will do the same thing, but it is right Control and Delete for the hotkeys. You will enter your password again, and you will be set into Windows Server 2019 Data Center Desktop Experience. If you're on a hard drive, oftentimes this takes a little bit of time, but since I am on an SSD, this is pretty snappy for me, and you'll be greeted with a lot of things immediately starting up. So what we are going to do is we are going to say no for the network right now if you get that prompt. We're going to say don't show this again and close, and we are going to close out this server manager. We do those things just so that we can clear up the space and get to the main desktop so we can finish the installation of the virtual machine. We say no to network so that we aren't discoverable right away on our local network, and we don't show again on that window there because we already know that this is a evaluation period for the data center. So, you are now on your desktop and you need to install the VirtualBox Guest Additions. This will help interweave some of the functions of VirtualBox with the actual Windows server like it's a main machine. These machines oftentimes don't come with their own packages or their own kernels for the middle parts that say I am a desktop or I am just a virtual machine. So, with the guest additions, we will be able to introduce this virtual machine as a full experienced machine. Click on Devices, and at the bottom here, you will say Insert Guest Additions CD. If this did not work, that would mean that your ISO was still inserted into the VirtualBox Manager. So while the machine is running, you can go into Settings, go into your storage, and under where you put the Server 2019 ISO, you can see if your Server 2019 ISO is still in this devices, and if it is, you can click on this and remove disk from virtual drive. Once that is empty, click OK, click back on your VirtualBox, and you can go back to devices and insert Guest Editions CD. If that still doesn't work, I would recommend try reinstalling the virtual machine. However, this worked for us, so we are going to go into our disk drive here, this PC, and we're going to double click our Guest Editions VirtualBox. We're going to click Next, just kind of click on through here, just because we need all of those files anyways. However, I always do recommend reading things if you are just unsure of how things are going. And again, here we want this to install because we need this to work for our drivers. It'll blink a couple times and it will need a reboot for the first time. So we click Finish, sends the signal to shut down, stops all of the services, and if everything worked correctly, your Windows Server 2019 will start up again. I'm going to let this go here just because it's not that slow. Log in. And it's going to take a second. Things will pop up for Server Manager. However, once the guest editions are installed, it will allow you the full functionality of your virtual machine within your desktop. Things like automatic resolution will be set, and you can now use your virtual machine as a standalone computer or the server that you were intending on using. There is a little bit left to do here. However, this is completely done. If you wanted to stop this tutorial right here, you could use your virtual machine as is and it'll work fully functional. But we still need to do a little bit if you want it to be like long-term usable. In the virtual machine, you're going to go into your Windows settings. Mind you, this is in the virtual machine, not in the main desktop. And you're going to go to Update Security, and you're going to click on Check for Updates. The reason why we need to do the updates and check for updates after an installation is because there are very, very important patches for the Microsoft kernel, drivers, antivirus, all the things that Windows in general needs to function, but Windows Server runs best for having all of their drivers set up. If you're having any problems with your virtual machine, go and check your updates to see if there are the first time setup updates available. Once you have this, you will just let this go through the download and you will install the drivers and install these updates like you would on a Windows 10 machine. After the restart and after you sign in, you will be completely done and you will have installed your first Windows Server 2019 full virtual machine. Now you have installed your first Windows Server 2019 virtual machine. The machine should be ready to go and you're free to use it for whatever you like since this tutorial for installing it is now over. If you liked the video, please remember to leave a like. And if you would like to see another video on things you can do in Windows Server, just leave a comment down below. I would be happy to take a look. I wanted to say thank you for watching this tutorial, and you have a wonderful day.